everybody. If you're staying, which I hope you are, we're going to hear from Auryn Macmillan, who's a user researcher, which I do not see a lot of in this space, so thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. And he's going to talk with you about how to turn your hack into a sustainable project, so please give him your rapt attention, curiosity, and excitement. Thank you, Auryn.
Cheers. Angle it up a little bit. Thanks for calling me, Lane. I thought I was on tomorrow, so this is like really rushed to jump down here, but luckily I made the slides in advance. I was actually just now setting up a colony for someone else for exactly what I'm trying to talk about here, so kind of very, very timely. So what I'm going to do is quickly just run through a primer on kind of what Colony is for anyone that's not aware of it, anyone that hasn't interacted with it before, and then that's going to be a really quick primer. And what I was actually hoping to make this more of is kind of a workshop where anyone that's got a hack that they essentially want to have persist beyond the scope of the hackathon here, that they want to turn into something viable, sustainable, long term, then essentially come around and help people get set up if they want to create a colony, or at least just do some kind of Q&A on some of the decisions that need to be made to set up a colony. So yeah, with that in mind, let's just kind of jump into a quick overview. So the firm is 19th century technology. Setting up a company it's slow, laborious, expensive. So registering, doing legals, issuing shares, getting bank accounts, all that stuff, it's a painful process. Work coordination, HR, budgeting, payments, contracts, bookkeeping, all that stuff is again, a painful process. And then access to capital is this kind of essentially boys club. It's very much a kind of a networking game and a game of being able to convince a kind of small group of people that an idea is viable. And that's not to say that it's the wrong approach, but it's a difficult thing to crack for a large portion of the population. Colonies intend to be essentially the firm for the 21st century. Super simple to set up, really, really low barrier to entry. So, I mean, the claim we make is as easy as a Facebook group to create. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's a simple process. They're digital native organizations where essentially the organizational logic is enforced by software instead of rules. They're intended to kind of eat this middle management layer. So colonies want to create an environment where you have this kind of bottom-up contribution flow, where people who are contributing value are able to identify the value that they're contributing and to be essentially autonomous, self-managing, and for the rest of the organization to be able to kind of validate that contribution. And then that kind of leads into the incentive model. So Colonies has this interesting kind of incentive model. You bootstrap a token, define its value, and then reward people for the work that they contribute to the organization. The reward is both in the form of tokens in the colony's treasury, but then also reputation in the colony, which kind of later on leads colonies to be able to become these kind of reputation-mediated entities, these kind of meritocratic organizations where the people who are actively contributing to it are the ones who end up with kind of decision-making power in the organization. So some kind of quick examples of what essentially like how we think the current version of Colony, the DApp, is useful. So some examples of some colonies that are kind of up and running or are kind of planning to get up and running soon is a local mesh networking cooperative that pools the revenues from their mesh network to then fund network maintenance and upgrades, a co-working space where you offset the cost of your co-working space by contributing work to the space, an NFT art gallery that distributes revenues based on your contributions to the art gallery, as in both the art that you contribute or the effort or the work that you contribute to getting traffic through and actually making sales of art. An established Web3 project turning kind of passive community members into active contributors, or what I'm hoping to see more of here at the hackathon is these hackathon projects that go from being kind of an idea to a sustainable project and fairly reward their contributors without having had funding up front. I think that's the use case that's most exciting for me right now. I have a couple of side projects that I've started, one that I'm starting this weekend, where this kind of incentive model is what's kind of driving contributions. So they're grant-funded projects or kind of prize money-funded projects where we distribute those that funding whenever it does come in, proportional to the amount of work that people have contributed to make the product that this project is trying to develop. So I'll dive into a specific example here in a minute when I share my screen and we start poking through some colonies. But the other thing that I just wanted to point out was that Colony's kind of developer tools allow you to kind of take all of the pieces that we use to build our DApp and kind of plug that into any other application. And so the interesting kind of, there's a bunch of potentially interesting outcomes from that. Basically the ability to insert Colony-style organization and incentives into any other application. So you can imagine things like an MMO where every piece of gold you kind of collect in the game gives you an influence over the project's future roadmap and a share of the project's the revenue. Or a ride-sharing application where the drivers and the people building the application end up becoming the kind of owners or beneficiaries of the organization, end up gaining kind of reputation in the organization and being able to dictate its roadmap. Or a social media application where your impressions earn you a revenue share and a voting right in the future roadmap for the organization. I said earlier that it was not very DAO-ish, and the reason for that is just the current version of Colony is a very kind of permissioned architecture. So you directly permission accounts with kind of unilateral ability to execute kind of whatever the specific permission you gave them is. There's no voting yet. There's no dispute resolution process yet. But that's all kind of coming in the pipeline. So what I'm kind of excited about now is the ability to kind of create, again, these bootstrapping upstart projects and allow them to essentially bootstrap the reputation supply of all of their contributors so that once the functionality is enabled and once those projects are ready, they can basically seamlessly hand it over to the community of people that have built up a reputation supply contributing to the organization. Yeah, and so I guess from there, I'm keen to just go play with the app, and so anyone that's got your laptop out, then feel free to kind of play along. Otherwise, I'm just going to poke through it and show you some of the features. And if anyone has any questions, wants to point anything out, then just yell out, and we'll keep it really open. Bear with me for a second while I figure out screen sharing here, and yeah, then we'll start poking. I guess now, if anyone has any questions in the meantime, feel free to jump in. Yeah, so the question was, do I think that Colony is more suitable for non-profits that are just trying to kind of dish out work, or for for-profit organizations that are trying to kind of distribute, I guess, profits, revenues, whatever it is? I'd say either or. I don't think that it's necessarily better for one or the other. The colonies that I've created so far maybe towed the line. So they're grant funded. They don't really have a business model. So I guess wouldn't really call them kind of for profit, but they do have a rewards model that's one of the interesting mechanics that Colony has is this rewards model where you are able to reward contributors, basically periodically create a rewards distribution that pays out a chunk of tokens to all of the reputation holders proportional to the amount of reputation and native tokens that they hold. So that kind of profit sharing, revenue sharing, dividends like kind of mechanism obviously would lend itself well to kind of a for-profit organization. But I mean, I'm using it in the context of Burn Signal, which is most definitely not a for-profit organization. So it's really just kind of an alternate rewards model, and kind of how you use it is up to you, I guess. So this, I mentioned, let's zoom in a little bit. I mentioned that I was just creating a colony, or helping someone create a colony. This is the one that I just helped create. But I'm going to go ahead and jump over into a different colony to start with. We'll go into the beta colony. So we just launched this one, and it's essentially a colony that's trying to incentivize our community members to contribute to developing colony as a kind of ongoing project. The resolution's not great here, so I guess it's going to be a little bit difficult to read. But in terms of features of the colony application, basically we have this task construct, which is the atomic level unit of work for a colony. This is how a colony pays out its balance. It's how it awards reputation. And I guess on that, a reputation is awarded every time the colony pays out its native token. And so each colony selects a native token when it's set up. In this case, it's BLNY, which we kind of nicknamed Baloney, which is, this is the beta colony, which is a precursor to the meta colony, which will be the kind of the governing entity for the colony network. And so we're using this as a bit of a testing ground. The native token for the meta colony is CLNY, so BLNY just came as a bit of a play on words from that. But this native token can be any ERC20 compliant token. So you can go and pick DAI as your native token if you want, or you can spin up a new token when you create the colony. And that's a really important choice because it can't be changed. Once you create that native token, once you kind of decide on that native token, you cannot change it later, and it has some pretty big implications on how reputation is distributed. So in the case of, I'll jump over to another colony, Burn Signal. This is a project that I started at ETH New York last year. It's grant funded and kind of prize money funded. We've got some funding through Gitcoin grants. We've got a small Moloch grant, and we won a little bit of prize money at ETH New York. And basically what we do is set up milestones. So development milestones when we, say, release our proof of concept app, or we release the MVP version of our app, or we implement some feature set. We kind of define milestones, and when we hit those, we pay out a chunk of the DAI that this colony is holding onto through that rewards mechanism that I mentioned earlier. So all of the tasks that people are doing in the application are all actually just being paid out with this Burn Signal token. And the really interesting thing there is that it doesn't require us to know exactly how much funding that we have up front. It doesn't require us to allocate any specific amount of DAI, of US dollars, or of Ether or anything like that up front for work. We can reward everyone with this native token, and all of our contributors know that when we hit a milestone, they'll be able to claim a relative portion of whatever we do have, but don't necessarily know exactly how much we have. And so it's, the whole purpose of this talk is to talk about how to kind of bootstrap a project from a hackathon into something that's sustainable. And this is the kind of model that I've been following with this project, and that I think we can replicate with a bunch of other projects, is essentially a rewards model where all of the contributors understand that they're going to be rewarded fairly compared to one another, but you don't have to have a specific amount of funding allocated in advance. So you don't have to understand exactly how much funding is going to come in advance. So yeah, I think again, this is a model that I'd like to see replicated here at the hackathon with any projects that want to kind of persist beyond the scope of the hackathon. And again, just to kind of poke around features a little bit more, we have a suggestions tab here, which is basically, I'll jump back over to the beta colony because it actually has some suggestions in it. Oh, wrong one. And this is kind of our bottom-up contribution funnel here. So anyone can come in and suggest a task, and then As an admin in the colony, if I see a suggestion that is in a domain where I have permissions, I can accept it, and that automatically generates a linked task over here that can then be allocated funding and assigned to someone and pay out tokens and reputation. The community tab here just lists all of the members of the colony. So this one has a bunch of people in it, basically because everyone that joins colony gets automatically subscribed to this one. So they kind of inflates the number of people in this one. But we have actually had a pretty decent amount of kind of active contributors. And I guess the last thing that I wanted to touch on here in terms of, it's not my profile, sorry, is just the permission structure. So again, I talk about colonies not being very DAO-ish yet. Essentially, you explicitly permission users within some context in the colony. So we have this domain hierarchy, which is, I guess you can think of like categories in a forum or folders in a file system that allow you to contextualize the tasks and payments that you're creating, and then contextualize the reputation that you earn from completing those tasks. In future, what that will allow us to do is have these really localized dispute resolution processes. So say a dispute pops up in the front-end engineering domain, then it's front-end engineers who get to weigh in on that dispute resolution process. But it also has a really clear escalation path up through this kind of domain hierarchy. So if it can't be resolved within front end, then it may get escalated to engineering. If it can't be resolved there, then it may get escalated to the kind of top level domain in the colony. But in lieu of that, for the time being, we have this domain-specific permissioning system where you can basically give different people different sets of permissions throughout that domain hierarchy. So the way that we've used it in this colony is basically for all of the people that are contributing code in the dev domain, we give them the administration permission, which lets them autonomously jump in and create tasks and allocate funds. And then it requires me, the benevolent dictator of this colony, to come in and actually finalize tasks and pay out the tokens and reputation associated with it. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview of kind of what Colony can do right now. So I guess my ask from you guys is just if anyone's running a project and would like to see it exist beyond the scope of the hackathon, then come and have a chat to me. We can figure out if Colony makes sense. Otherwise, if anyone has any questions about Colony or about kind of helping your project to persist beyond the hackathon, using a Colony or not, I'd love to talk more, and yeah, keen to hear what people are working on. So
you have time for questions here too, so.
Yeah. If anyone has questions, then fire away. Yeah.
Cool. Sorry to monopolize the questions. You mentioned the meta colony.
Yeah.
Can you give like a quick overview of what the meta colony is?
Yeah. So every time a task is completed in a colony, the colony network takes a fee on that task. Let me just scroll down here so you can't really see because of the resolution. The colony network takes a fee. It's currently set at 2.7% of whatever token you're transacting in. Those tokens get forwarded onto the meta colony, and the meta colony is then tasked with incentivizing ongoing development of the colony network. So it's the vehicle that will end up governing and incentivizing the proliferation of the colony network moving forward. Eventually, I think a goal for Colony as a company is to kind of roll a lot of its operations into the meta colony. Right now, our kind of dog fooding experiment is with the beta colony, which is the baloney precursor to the meta colony.